is Ross Bateman, Role-Playing Public Radio. This is RPPR, episode 109, the 5th Ed Dungeons & Dragons Breakdown. And with me, not as always, is Bill and Sean, who are players in our many of our games. Bill has been all the way back from the New World campaign, 4th Ed, and Sean is one of our newer players. He ran the Dissidents of Darlin one-shot, and has been playing. You'll hear a lot more of him from the Masks of Nyarlathotep campaign, which is upcoming soon.
Unless we all die along with our characters.
Well, the episodes are already recorded. We already got like 10 or so games recorded.
That's true. So, even if we all perish, so long as you survive.
You made it through the first two chapters, spoiler.
You can kill a character and come back. It's completely fine.
No. I'm not talking about the characters. I'm saying, what if we die along the way? See, like Tom, normally he would be here, but now he's gone.
Well, I want to talk to this episode. The Tom is not here because I want to talk with people who had a lot of experience with 5th Ed Dungeons and Dragons. And you guys probably have more experience than anyone else in our local group. Tom has only played that one time at Gen Con, and you're one shot. Yeah.
So 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times.
But yeah. His staring at other books to playing D&D ratio is pretty low.
He doesn't even have the books yet himself. So we'll be talking about 5th Ed Dungeons & Dragons. Sean is newer to the gaming scene, so and Bill is, of course, more of a veteran. So we'll have some comparison and contrast.
That beard is mighty.
Yes. Your grog level is over 9. No. All right. So there's not much news. I will say RPPR B-Sides Volume 2, the episodes are encoded, and I will have them out this month. I just wanted to get all of that. I wanted to get the bundle of leveling done. So as I mentioned last episode, where I'm just getting new art for this compilation. It'll be new promotional artwork, which is I got Violet Kirk to do it. I will explain the description of it. It will be the RPPR or Pontifex Lich running a game for the RPPR Dragon, and Sprinkles the Unicorn, or Sparkles the Unicorn. So, and there'll be little in jokes and stuff like that.
No Balgrin?
You can't fit it on it's just a little square. Yeah, I know.
They got more people than that in dogs playing D&D, Ross.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe next time. But anyways, so that's it for news. So let's talk about 5th Ed Dungeons & Dragons.
Let's do that.
The DMG just came out recently. I got a review copy of it, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. And but we haven't had time to really incorporate it into games. But you guys, why don't both of you just give sort of your background and your in terms of being D&D players, GMs, and that kind of thing, and we'll just go from there. So, Sean, you want to start? Yeah.
Pretty much before 2013, I hadn't really played D&D or role-play games at all, with the exception of maybe occasional one-shots in the dorms.
Yeah.
In college, and I had looked at the books for 4th Ed at that time, that's pretty much it as far as experience.
Fair enough. Gosh, I started role playing. Because it's pretty much like D&D sort of brackets my history of role playing. I started in 2004, so I was a sophomore in college. Dan, frequently known as Fuzzy Dan, friend to all, actually got me into the hobby with a Star Wars game, which makes me sad later on because, Star Wars, sad. But anyway, that was D20 Star Wars, so ostensibly 3rd Ed-ish. Played 3rd Ed D&D off and on, experimented with, the wilds of that, ran some Iron Heroes, played a little Iron Heroes.
Yeah.
Little D20 Modern, all that jazz. That's basically the start of things for me. Played a bit, off and on.
So you really started
Ed.
with 3rd Ed.
Yeah. I'd read a couple 2nd Ed books, never owned any, and, played some Baldur's Gate, which...
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I could tell, was a relatively faithful reproduction, other than being, fairly murder hobo-ish.
Well, that's...
Being a video game.
We'll talk about
Weird.
murder hoboism, yeah.
So that's as far as history goes.
Yeah. Just so you know, I kind of similar arc, Bill. I think I started a little earlier in that. I started at the very tail end of the 2nd Ed in terms of I read a lot of those books. Yeah, I didn't play very much, but the older kids
too much riffs to be played.
Well, There's a yeah. As you know, I experimented with thrifts in the early days.
Learned it from you, all right?
Yeah, pretty much. But I read some of the secondhand books and played a little bit and that kind of thing. But I really got hardcore into it as the third ed wave began. So we won't go into the history of D&D, but there's a huge divide between
It exists.
yeah, between second edition and third edition, and then so it's incrementally changed. So first off, why don't we just talk about an overall impression of Fifth Ed as a game? So, Sean, what are your impressions? What do you like? What do you don't like? That kind of
Overall, I actually do like Fifth Ed better than Fourth. Character creation is a lot simpler. The math is not as calculus-y kind of feeling. As far as running games, I feel like I was able to just jump right in with it. After having experienced a couple of Bill's games and some of yours, it was pretty easy to, once I had the monster manual, just run.
Yeah. This was your first time running games, right? That was
right. Overall, I like the artwork. I like the way that the books are written. So,
yeah,
I'd say it's all in all very good.
All right. Bill.
So to get really out there, I'm gonna start from some meta commentary. What I've read, like as far as really kind of negative criticism or constructive criticism, even of Fifth Ed, is that really it's not very groundbreaking. It's pretty it's kind of love lettery to previous editions, and I will grant them that. But here's sort of my impression of it. I feel like, in the context of my own history and stuff, Third Ed was built on a framework of a lot of really great ideas that just weren't proved out mathematically. Basically, kind of failed in the testing to go deep enough. I think Monty Cook and some of the other designers are kind of on record in a vague kind of way as like saying they kind of assumed that people would play characters the way they assumed people would play characters. I realize
and their
that's kind
expectations
of
were sort of based on second editions. So.
Exactly, which is what sort of developed the whole Third Ed cleric and druidzilla problem. Essentially people playing what hadn't been intended as frontline characters but ended up being capable, etc., etc. Math problems from the DM side, encounters being hard to build, all that jazz. Fourth Ed kind of, in my opinion, flips that on its head. The math is really solid, but I kind of, at the end of the day, I feel like the ideas weren't really as much in there. I actually have been crashing my way back through Robin Law's blog here recently, and there's an article of his that I'm kind of going to diverge from, where he talks about, like... And this goes to opinion for me, for Fifth Ed as well. What makes D&D special to me and what probably keeps it in place as, at least by sales volume and probably player basis, like, the world's biggest RPG. So D&D has a really simple, it's not core mechanic, but core activity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically kill things and take their stuff.
Yes.
But... I think what really makes it special is that there's a meta-level activity that sort of goes on at the table, if you've got a table that likes to play this way, is that there's a meta-core activity of trying to subvert the actual core activity. I think this comes up, a lot in fantasy games at RPPR. The New World is basically composed of the players trying to avoid every fight they possibly can.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of
Let's
where
talk
Fourth
to
Ed,
the monsters instead of kill them.
Yeah, and that's why Fourth Ed kind of ended up breaking down and feeling kind of samey and boring after a while, was because it really didn't have a lot of support for things that weren't the core activity. So, to pull this all together, in talking about, like, yes, this is kind of a love letter to previous editions, but it's taken the stable mathematical underpinnings of Fourth to actually drive an engine that looks a lot like Third, lets you do all those non-core activity things, and lets you accomplish kind of that player feeling of, haha, we have, conquered the encounter, but in a way that was a surprise to the DM, basically.
Yeah.
That makes the game feel special. So, that's kind of long-winded, but that's what I think.
And I will say that as a DM, a first-time DM, it's actually very exciting when somebody does something unexpected.
Oh yeah.
When they solve things in a unique way or do something completely horrifying.
I mean,
we'll talk about later, maybe.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, honestly, that's one of my major motivations to run games. Is I will set up problems, but then I don't figure out solutions myself. I literally just come to the table to find out what the players will come up with, and it's very entertaining, regardless of what happens. Now, to talk about like the balance between the editions, I think the biggest problem Third Ed has, and this is sort of a well-documented thing, is what is called spellcaster supremacy, which you sort of touch on with the Druidzilla and that kind of thing, but also arcane spellcasters.
Yeah.
And the idea is in Third Ed, martial characters, fighters especially, are vastly inferior to spellcasters, and there hasn't been and. There are a lot of reasons why, and the thing is, one of the big things is actually in Second Ed that supremacy isn't as documented. Like fighters do a lot better in Second Edition than they do in Third Edition, because of they have better saving throws, they have a lot more hit points, they're much more dangerous in combat, especially if you optimize them. Like a dart fighter in Second Edition is brutal.
A dart fighter?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, no, throwing darts, because a fighter could specialize in a weapon, get +1 to hit, +2 to damage, and then it's a thrown weapon, so you get your strength bonus, and you could get you could have +8 to damage with a dart at level 1 if you rolled really well for strength.
Wow.
And the thing is, that's huge because hit points were lower in Second Ed than Third Ed. And the thing with darts, you would just start with like 3 attacks per round, so you could just murder them.
Weapon speed. Wow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just. And spellcasters had a lot more limitations in Second Edition, and part of this is there's different theories about why. One of it is just cultural, like people who play RPGs more likely associate themselves with wizards than badass warriors. It's brains over brawn, and so why shouldn't wizards be more special? The other thing is the realism thing. Like a fighter can't do that. That no human could do whatever crazy stunt or whatever. But a wizard, well, it's magic. Of course he can turn himself invisible, fly 400 feet, and drop fireballs on enemies. Why not? So that's this again.
At the same time, though, with the earlier editions, the fantasy would have been a little bit more rooted in sword and sorcery type things with Conan. So that might have been why the fighters were a little bit better in the earlier editions, is because there was more of a mindset for that.
Well, I mean, also the early editions were rooted in wargaming, and they had just made them very restricted. And also, wizards were weaker in those.
I've looked at a few of them. They're squishy.
Well, also, I mean, if you look at Conan stories, wizards are pretty weak. Like they can do the one thing, but they have a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
So the game balance was vastly different. So Third Ed made spellcasters just superior to martial characters in pretty much every way, and I think the thing is in Fourth Ed, I think the weakness of Fourth Ed is actually the fact that it requires an active investment of time and system mastery from every player. Because you have different types of players, and some people are like you guys, like both of you learn what your characters can do and how to do them. Some of them are more casual, shall we say, where they don't necessarily learn how their characters work, or they're just here to have fun. They just show up and they play, and they don't necessarily pay attention as much to the rules. And like I remember playing, and I mentioned this before in the podcast, the few games I played at John and Katie's house, the Fourth Ed, where everybody knew their characters and they could synergize. And that was the way Fourth Ed Combat was meant to be played. It was an entirely different experience. And so I really do like Fourth Ed, and I think the thing, and of course I have run a lot of Fourth Ed, but as for the not supporting actions outside of the key activities, I mean, that's just role playing. And like, I kind of like the openness of it, because it's kind of like Fate or some of the other things where it's just like, all right, well, I'll just adjudicate on the fly. And I think that's fine. I mean, you're not trying to build an intense social conflict RPG,
True.
So,
however, I will see your point with this rejoinder. A long time ago, Rich Burlew, who draws and writes Order of the Stick, back when he was producing other content for his website, was writing sort of a kitbashy article on diplomacy rules for Third Ed, and essentially made the point that he didn't find it very helpful to be told sort of, by the enshrinement of the zeroth rule and what have you, that as the DM he could do whatever he wanted. He already knew he could do that. He was hoping for some sort of framework that if he couldn't come up with anything to hang it on.
No,
I think that's
as
the
a springboard.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not all of us can be the creative wellspring of one Ross Payton.
Yes. No, I understand that too, because a lot of times, because you want to make it fair for the players, and you don't want to say they succeed or they don't, or just flip a coin. You want something a little better. I mean, it's the whole point of having a game. I understand that, and I felt that too.
Yeah.
But I felt like in 4th Ed, especially during the New World campaign or Dark Sun, I never felt I came up with mini games basically to do that.
And you did you did a great job. I just for me, I can't necessarily go to that design place as easily. So,
but for me, 4th Ed did solve the spellcaster supremacy problem.
That's true. The balance
just
was
completely,
a lot better.
And that for me was more important than the other thing. So, and I feel 5th Ed has gone back, has reverted. I feel spellcaster supremacy is a problem.
I actually don't know that spellcaster supremacy is a problem. It may just look like it because teamwork is such a big component of 5th Ed, at least the way that our group has played, and it works really well.
Right.
Players can play off of each other excellently. For example, you and David King in the one shot that name.
Yeah.
You and David in the one shot that I ran, that Bard Monk combo with the Cloud of Daggers and the Stunning Strike, wham. The Cloud of Daggers by itself is pretty good, but when you combine it with something else, it just makes it lethal. And then in the other campaigns that we've been playing with Bill or you, well, you haven't run any D&D, but with Bill, well, you played at least.
Anyway.
You get these really nice interactions and give and takes between the fighter characters and the spellcasting characters to where if you use them properly, neither one is really supreme. They just balance each other really well.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I'll pick particularly on your points here, Ross, just because that's the thing I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I think the problem may lie in that the spellcasters do look a lot like the 3rd Ed spellcasters to a certain degree until you start digging into stuff. For one, you've got the concentration rule preventing buff stacking.
Right.
Meaning, spellcasters may still get to do amazing cosmic things, but they're not going to stack multiple amazing cosmic things at once.
Yeah.
So they may still, have a meteor swarm that can do a fuck ton of damage, at one time, but it's just going to be that spell. Where I think most of your non-magic characters kind of, how to say this without turning into a stats nerd? I think spellcasters have shifted more back into that glass cannon kind of balance, where they can hit really hard but limitedly, where they have juiced. I've noticed especially fighters who still feel the most like a 4th Ed character depending on build. You can do some really, really interesting tactical stuff from what I've been seeing. And your damage can, as much as that's the important thing, you get a lot more consistency. You can do it round after round. And I think part of it is we all ignored the spell concentration rules in 3rd Ed because they were hard.
Well, concentration was just to
keep a spell if you were damaged.
Yeah, keep a spell if you were damaged, or if you were preparing a multi-round spell, like a summoning spell.
Right. Where those rules function.
Well, the thing is, all the buff spells in 3rd Ed were fire and forget. So, you could have you could stack them up. And I mean that's really the thing is the spellcasters though have a lot more versatility, and I think the thing is we haven't really seen the effects of it because I've read a lot of commentary online that nitpicking all of this stuff, and it sort of breaks down more after you get past level 8, in the mid to higher levels is where it really breaks down, because especially you're dealing with monsters with unique abilities, and if you're dealing with monsters that can turn invisible or fly or have ranged attacks or exotic abilities, which become very common after a certain point, that's where the fighter is just a dude with a sword, whereas the spellcaster can turn invisible, fly, and cast fireballs from 400 feet up.
But I would almost argue that the characters that are actually supreme in this edition are what I would call hybrid characters. Things like the monk and the bard that are more...
But they're still essentially spellcasters.
They're well, not exactly. That monk is pretty much a badass hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
They really I really like using the monk, and I like using the monk better than I have liked using the warlock or the wizard.
Interesting.
Even though I naturally sort of gravitate towards the spellcaster, the monk is sort of I know. But
back to that cultural thing, yeah.
the monk, it's not as squishy, so you have more versatility because you can do a little bit of what the fighters do,
right.
but you also have these interesting sidebar achievements that you can do as well.
Because the thing, okay, without breaking this down into cracking a handbook open here and looking at it, like, I'm pretty certain if you were trying to be that wizard, like, you would have to choose between flying or being invisible because you can't concentrate on both spells at once. And if that monster hits you, you've got to, make your save at 10 or half the damage, whichever's higher, to not fall out of the sky or become visible.
Right.
Well, and then there's also the matter of the sorcerer, which is really powerful, but it has negative consequences potentially, which I think is fantastic. That is a wonderful game design as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, that's mostly the wild magic sorcerer. I think the dragon sorcerer is pretty much just get some fun things. But the options are both there.
Right.
And wild magic is much more fun. Sorry, dragon lovers out there.
And this is, again, we're only a few months into 5th ed, so I think probably in a year we'll have a much better understanding of where the system balance is and and we could go on and on and on just about whether this is balanced particularly or not. I think, and so it's certainly a valid concern, and I think, and it's also the non-combat problems is what is, again, because the wizard can be like, well, today I'll fly, or tomorrow I'll turn invisible to deal with this challenge or this conflict. Whereas the fighter guy is just fighter guy, so if he comes with a bottomless pit or, indecipherable runes or, something like that, he isn't as versatile either. Like, he can hit things, and that's about it.
I don't know, though, because have you seen the way that Anne plays fighters?
Well, again, those are low-level games. I'm thinking more at the mid and higher levels is where the difference is. Like, the thing, from what I understand, is 5th Ed was extensively playtest, but more at the lower levels. Like, they don't have as much playtesting at the higher levels. And the thing about 4th Ed is everything was balanced from 1 to 30, where everything, in terms of, the mathematics of what your ability bonuses and item bonuses and what any given power could do.
Right. And from a strictly wargaming perspective.
Right.
But,
And I will say that you're probably on point, and that may be why our encounter calculators aren't working when we're developing games for the higher levels.
I know what's going on with that.
But
anyway.
It's...
we'll get to encounter calculators. One thing but the one thing is, so that I think is 5th Ed's big advantage over 4th Ed is the ease of learning. Is that it's picked up because, again, 4th Ed requires that buy-in, and you get. So if everyone was invested in it, I think you'd have a tighter game. But you seldom have a group where everyone is as invested in it. So certainly for one shots and games where you have a lot of different player types showing up, I think 5th Ed, especially at lower levels, has an advantage. And it's fun. I mean, you guys, everyone here has had fun doing it. Are there any other things aside from this that really stand out in your mind when dealing, Sean, again, you're new to the whole thing. What stood out most to you when reading the books or playing the game or running the game? Anything, you mentioned, how you liked running games because what players will do to surprise you, and which isn't specific to D&D, but, that's really fun.
Well, I know that what Anne and I have noticed, we're married, so we talk about this all the time at home. So, Anne actually hates playing the spellcasters because she gets frustrated with the leveling up for the spellcasters because she feels like there's too much information she needs to process. And this is not Anne being super casual. My wife is...
No. Wow.
If anybody knew Anne, that would not be the case. She reads everything meticulously, and that is the problem. So if you are sort of a more borderline OCD, I'm going to probably get in trouble for that comment later.
Only if she listens. Just make sure she doesn't listen to it.
I'll get in trouble for that comment later.
Borderline OCD. I see what
she'll read every single word, so leveling up becomes much more complicated. And so when you're leveling up midway through in a setting or a campaign or something, she doesn't want to deal with that.
All right.
Yeah,
so,
which ultimately is kind of a problem.
The player style,
I doubt we ever could have got Anne into the hobby with 4th Ed because it was inescapable.
Well, she tried playing as a cleric, and she hated it. Like, she was screaming bloody murder.
Because, that
I would
level
have
of
thought the
choice
warlock would have been worse
analysis.
than the cleric in that respect, but
Whereas, I don't mind that as much, but I like also having more versatility, so like I said, I really love the monk.
yeah, I mean, if you just want somebody who...
My only frustration with the monk is the way the chi points are set up is very confusing at first.
Yeah.
And they could have outlined that better, that you are essentially a hybrid spellcaster, but they didn't really. So there's these things to where you have to flip back and forth between sections of the book when you're in the middle of gameplay, which is incredibly frustrating. And it will be remedied once all of us have the spell cards, because then you can just throw those around.
Yeah, although you've hit on the core problem of, I think, anything but the rules lightest of RPGs in general. Like, if you can interact with it in much of a way, you're going to end up with the book flipping problem.
Which doesn't bug me, because...
I mean, it depends. I mean, like, a Gumshoe, I think, the only time that's happened is the really complex stuff in Night's Black Age and, like, the chase rules.
Right.
Like, Base Trail Cthulhu, you know.
But I would call that a pretty rules-like game. Base Trail of Cthulhu.
All right.
You know, I think there's actually, looks like a pretty clear breakdown between there and Night's Black Agents.
All right. I mean, when I think rules light, I think something like Wushu or Rhesus or like Fate Accelerated, which is very, very rules light.
Fate?
Yeah. Well, we were doing
I really
Fate
like
core.
Fate.
Yeah.
No, I've read through Fate now.
Okay.
Like, I have the core, so PDF.
Well, I was talking Fate Accelerated, which is a lighter version of it.
Oh, okay, so there's a streamlined one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
was going to say that it's almost as rules heavy as this.
Yeah.
In fact, possibly more so.
Yeah.
In some ways.
There are some abstractions and some conceptual things you have to get your head around.
I really should not have tried to read Fate for the first time while working overnights. It's going to be a long trek back to understanding that game.
Yeah.
As a first timer, though, I was impressed with the lack of condescension in the beginning of the book for explaining what an RPG is.
For 5th Ed?
For 5th Ed.
Okay, yeah.
Like, it explains it, but it doesn't talk down to you like you're a moron. Other systems that I've read recently spend so much time explaining what an RPG is that I'm almost offended. Even if I was a first timer.
Do you want to name names, or can you think of them?
I like these systems.
Yeah.
I just don't like the way that they present at the beginning with what an RPG is. Monsters.
Well, Monsters is entirely written for from a kid's point of view, so...
Right. And I really love that system, but reading through it, I wanted to smack myself in the head with the book.
Yeah.
Whereas this spends only a few pages each time explaining what the basics are. And I think that really helps with first-timers because they don't feel overwhelmed and they don't feel like you are now being initiated into this and you must take 40 whacks on the backside kind of thing.
Yeah.
So...
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
And I realize that's probably a negative for a lot of hardcore players, maybe, but...
Most of the hardcore players
don't even
gloss over
section.
that because they've read it so many times by now.
Yeah, like the thing is, you weren't here. Like, you haven't read some of the books from like the '90s and the '80s, especially.
Oh my God.
Like, the things that I really love are the ones, like, especially in the '80s and '90s, right after the Satanic Panic or during the Satanic Panic, where like they go out of their way, like, this is not intended to foster a belief in the occult. The supernatural is not real. World of Darkness. Actually, a lot of Palladium games. Cinnabar actually had that as well, so
And for the record, I did buy Monsters for my brother-in-law for Christmas, so I do not hate it. I just didn't like that.
Like,
you just hated those pages.
Yeah, which were many. So
Monsters is written like I when I wrote Road Trip and Curriculum, I chose a different style because like I could see how that turned off people. I mean, like for me, I'm kind of like, well, I love the game anyway, so like.
And I actually felt like 4th Ed was a little bit more like that too. When I read through the player's handbook there, and didn't want to finish that one.
Yeah. Okay.
I read it because I'm me and I read anything you put in front of me. But
the thing, like the 4th Ed, the system balance is so tight that I kind of hope that they open it up more to a more OGL kind of license, so somebody else could take another crack at it.
Yeah.
Like a Pathfinder for 4th Ed, I feel would be
sort
really
of make a 4.5.
Yeah, 4.5.
I don't know if,
like a streamlined, abbreviated version.
I don't know if they really need any more market fragmentation.
Well, Yeah, whatever. I'm just like
from a business perspective,
wish list. Like, yeah. Well, they're not making any money on. Yeah. Anyway.
Damn Skippy.
Yeah.
Just a complete non sequitur here, though. I think it's worth throwing in from a production value standpoint. I think these are far and away.
They are
best Dungeons and Dragons
They are
books
very
that have
pretty.
ever. The art, the layout
I
quality.
really like the mat on the back.
Yeah,
It's just
every book
beautiful.
has
It's very-
about a half gloss, half matte. That
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels neat. I also like how for the main adventures they're printing so far the
Horde of the Dragon Queen.
Horde of the Dragon Queen, Rise of Tiamat. They actually got away from. They used a. I don't know my paper qualities, but it's not a gloss finish. So if you want to go in and highlight or make notes or anything, you're good.
Is it a weighted?
It's a good thick paper stock.
Yeah.
Thick stock.
It's thicker stock. It's also got a coarser grain to it. It's just not glossed. But like the art is fantastic. I also think, it's been a big thing recently. They did a great job of the art not being sexist in this edition. I mean,
Yes.
there's maybe one kind of halfway cheesecakey picture in maybe once a book.
Third Ed
It's
was really
in
bad
that-
about that. But,
in this one, and also this one. Maybe complaining about the succubus. That's about the only one I can think of.
yeah,
But
and
that's
literally the
and-
premise of the monster.
That's the
yeah.
premise of
Yeah.
the monster. So
And they have the
really don't
incubus
feel
right
like-
next to it, right? So
Yeah,
like,
there's
the
a
incubus.
yeah. So like
Which-
it's take your
that-
pick. Like they have something for everyone. So like,
Yeah. There's eye candy for everybody in that page.
but considering this is a hobby that's kind of been known to have a problem with depictions, especially of the female form,
yeah.
you know,
Which is also what Anne really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because she saw the fourth Ed book and
For
was
that, I don't really. Well, it's been a couple
Dragon
years.
Boobs, Wayne Reynolds art. I'm just blocking.
Well,
it
yeah,
out.
Wayne Reynolds. Yeah.
there was some stuff in there.
Nothing against
haven't
Wayne
seen-
Reynolds.
well,
it was
yeah.
just the concentration of it.
Yeah.
I just got tired of that style.
The only
Pathfinder is a lot worse about it than in terms.
Once
of
again,
I've seen
Wayne
cheesecake
Reynolds
stuff.
Pathfinder.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
pretty.
It's, yeah.
But Pathfinder
classy,
is
guys.
like very. This is just talking about cheesecake, not in terms of like how they depict that kind of stuff in games. Like Pathfinder is very open in terms of, like they've had gay and transgendered characters
Yeah.
too. So like, we're not denigrating Pathfinder for that. It's just like they have a lot of cheesecake. In it.
There's boobs in that art.
Yeah.
That art.
One thing I would like to mention. This is sort of an anecdote. Actually, talking about Third Ed. I can't remember who it was, but the art director for Third Ed's books talked about how they specifically. You've read the story.
I think I have.
Talk about how they wanted to make a more inclusive, more diverse cast for like the iconics, which were like the default.
No,
characters.
this was for a Pathfinder book.
No, it was Third Ed because.
Okay, I read it
yeah,
for
yeah.
a Pathfinder book. If it turns out to be the same story.
Yeah, and so they would make directions like let's have this like instead of just making everybody like second edition. Everyone was white. Like all the characters were basically white. Like
They actually did a good job in that one.
yeah. But like in Third Ed, they were like, let's make this more diverse. Let's not just make it all generic white dudes and the occasional like white woman. So like they say, let's make this guy African. Let's make this guy Middle Eastern. Blah 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 blah. But like corporate pushed back and said no, because if they didn't specify, the artist always made them like Caucasian by default.
So then it looked like you were tokening.
Yeah. Awesome. So like they what happened, and they were overwritten several times. The art director was so like there were a lot of white people there, but like what happened was there's like one character in particular, Tordek the fighter.
Yeah.
And so he was originally meant to be like African or like
That
not
would have
white.
looked a lot.
But the artist and the art director or the other artist made him. I can't remember the exact thing, but kept making him Caucasian. So to get revenge because they couldn't make him not white, they just had Tordek being the scapegoat of the iconics.
Yes.
So like anytime something bad happened to a player character in the artwork, it was Tordek. He was the one petrified by the Gorgon. He was the one fell through the trap. He was the one eaten by a dragon. He was like so Tordek became like, all right, we have to include a white dude. Let's have him eaten by let's have his ass kicked. So anyways,
So the story I thought you were going to tell, and I don't know where to track
I'll
it down,
link to
but
that
it's about some Pathfinder art where somebody turned in a girl who was a high number on the Dolly Parton scale.
Yeah.
And they sent feedback to him like, no, that's not really what we're looking for. Can you give us somebody a little less twiggy, but then boom.
Yeah.
And it came back worse. And so it essentially just became a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Until it got to the point where the artist was just like, all right, I don't know what you want.
Yeah.
I can't make these boobs any bigger. So I thought that was the problem you were talking about.
No. This was just talking about diversity. So
Okay.
So Torduk the fighter in third ed was the whipping boy for variety for that reason. So anyway,
Getting back to the production value, though, I feel like even though the books are excellent, the starter kit fell way low.
I didn't spend a lot of time looking at it.
Well, they've got that flimsy little paper booklet, and then the dice are crap.
Really?
They are
I like my side.
horrid.
like would it like in terms of just like I don't know. What do you mean by crap? Like
They feel very flimsy, lightweight,
okay,
and
sure.
sometimes, like the set that Aaron had, the one that his came with, the dice that came with that, the paint was flaking off.
Oh,
That's
cheap.
really
Okay.
bad. So the starter kit, they just sort of didn't do any of that. And then they invested a lot into the books. I'm grateful for them doing the books, though they probably should have looked at the Hobbit picture a little bit closer.
Oh my gosh.
And the player's handbook,
that is
so creepy.
yeah, halflings, not hobbits, because hobbits,
Hobbits
are
is
trademarked by the
protected.
Tolkien literary.
Okay, halfling.
Yeah.
Halfling. It looks like if anybody's seen the horror movie Leprechaun, that's what it looks like
Pretty
with
much.
a ukulele.
Yep.
So, it's pretty
Yeah,
bad.
did I ever tell you that Katie told me that picture made her think of me?
Wow.
Ow.
Yeah.
Ouch.
That's just... ow.
Yeah.
So what do we talk? So yeah, the books are all very good, just in terms of artwork and presentation.
Yeah.
The layout, I feel, is okay. I feel like the layout probably could use a little improvement because again, you have people flipping back on the books a lot. So there is that.
And it actually told me to mention this, that she wishes they had page reference numbers for see this section.
Oh,
when
yeah,
they
that
talk about something, they say see it under this section, but they don't give the page number, which would have made things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Now, I explained to her why they didn't do that, because when you're publishing something, it's sort of a pain in the ass to know
hard to go
what the
back
page is
There are
actually
a
going to
good
be.
graphic. I think
but
it takes
good
time.
layout guide.
Like you could do that. There are
But you've got to
tools.
go back and kill so many C-page double X's.
Well, there are ways to like link it so that
Yeah.
it dynamically changes and stuff like that. But like, yeah,
But-
and InDesign is very nice. But like
That would have been maybe a good way of solving that, especially with things like the monk, to where
probably
see
the
this spells
reprint.
it page.
I bet they're going to revise these over time.
Well, Anne sort of generated one on her own, on a, like I said, borderline.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
care to share that with the RPPR database? I'd be happy to host it. They're very good. Yeah, the layout's about average. I mean, especially in terms of the RPG industry, it's very good. Like,
Okay. Yeah. Well,
I
that,
feel
that
like
was kind of the scale I was judging.
yeah.
on.
The thing is, like I kind of wish they'd gone more like the level of Eclipse Phase. Eclipse Phase does do that, and like
Yeah.
especially, of course, they haven't released the PDFs yet. The PDFs of Eclipse
That's
Phase
true.
are about the best because they have bookmarks and
many bookmarks.
yeah, it's just really easy to look up whatever you're looking for. But why don't we talk a little bit more about like running the games? Since we already mentioned the encounter calculators, and the DMG, the Dungeon Master Guide, just came out a little while ago, and that has the official encounter calculators. But you guys have been running before that.
which is superficially similar to what had come out for free in the basic stuff that's available online for free in PDF. Basically, there was one little correction that actually is going to make a big difference. I'll go ahead and talk about here. If you are interested in playing or running 5th Ed, you can direct yourself to enworld.org, where they're collating a lot of player-made materials. Something I found several versions of that turned out to be really helpful was a spreadsheet encounter calculator where you can type in numbers and it'll tell you how badly you're going to kill the party.
Which is a nice summary for what you're going to do when you
Yeah.
run a game. You can print it out and
Yeah.
just
It's
have it
also
there.
highly printable.
wow.
There are several out there. Find the one that works for you. To your particular point about the encounter calculator, one critical thing, as I've read it, changed between the initial basic rules print and it going to print in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Basically, that being that they went from a categorical system that rounds down to a categorical system that rounds up. So it turned out that strike that, reverse it. Rounds up instead of rounding down. So basically, you were creating encounters that flagged as hard, well, that's because they were at least 1 XP above medium. Whereas now, if it's hard, it's like it ceases being hard when you go 1 XP over hard. So, for instance, the last press,
There's a question, a difference between underestimating and overestimating.
Yeah. So, for instance, I use this calculator in rebuilding the encounters for Last Breath of Ashenport, which I'm assuming will come out eventually, Ross.
Yes.
But, it's fine. Not putting you on the spot or anything.
Yeah.
But
They know our backlog practices
it's true.
at this point.
It's true. It was Halloween themed. What are you trying to do to me here? It's December.
Okay, just remember...
It's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
The running between recording the game and publishing it on the site is 2 years, which was a horrible, lonely old house, which was the Call of Cthulhu one-shot. I ran it in 2009. I posted in 2011. So
wow, I feel privileged.
And so it's
on so quickly.
Yeah, you should. Like, it was.
You were fresh blood.
Well, that and Fifth Head, which is the new hotness.
Shiny new hotness. At any rate, especially the back half of that game, I had tuned to be pretty difficult for the party, and I was really. I mean.
Well, not totally off, but
yeah, not off. I still feel like those encounters were somewhat challenging.
I went into negatives.
Yeah, but not as challenging as I thought they would be.
Yeah.
But that's
which is pretty much what it played out as.
Yeah.
Also, I feel I should mention to the listeners, because not everybody may know, an encounter calculator is basically figuring out how dangerous a given group of monsters will be to a group of players. So, it's based on the XP or the challenge rating of a monster, versus the average level of the party. And so, this is a basic tool for the the thing about in D&D.
This is what was missing in Third Ed.
No, Third Ed had encounter.
Yeah, and it was nigh unusable.
Well, yeah, but because it was Third Ed,
right.
Third Ed had a lot of
good ideas, bad math.
That brings
bad
up
math execution.
Bad math. Well, also I think also in design. Actually, that brings up a really big point or good point that I want to talk about, which is monster design. And I feel Fourth Ed was perfect or near perfect because that page or that 2 pages, the monster was everything you needed to run monster. Mm-hmm. And Third Ed had the problem where this is the Iron Devil. It hears spell-like ability, spell-like ability, spell-like ability. Mm-hmm. And so you had to go to the player's handbook to find out what the monster could actually do. And if it had 20 power, 20 spell-like abilities, there was a whole industry of basically advice or adventures where here are the tactics for this monster. Mm-hmm. And Fourth Ed solved that, but now Fifth Ed has sort of gone back to the way of Third Ed because there's spell-like abilities and that kind of thing.
Well,
and I actually, that goes back to my point before about having to flip through the book, but now it's 2 books.
Yeah.
And when you've got players that are wanting to use your player handbook while you're running the game, it's very difficult to use a spellcasting monster because they keep hogging your book.
Yeah,
because so you have to literally write out in advance what its tactics are,
which is exactly what I've been doing.
Yeah,
it makes it easier for me anyway.
It does, but then you lose flexibility, and because then if the players do something unexpected,
unless you're like me and you have a flowchart that you wrote out, but whatever.
See, that's more time.
Have we introduced you to Caleb? You should really meet Caleb.
Yeah,
I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Is this an insult?
He likes the flowcharts, but
it's a good thing.
Good.
The thing is, again, I feel because they talked about the developers, Mike Merle was talking about, no, we'll keep the Fourth Ed, because people love that. And I love the Fourth Ed monster design because it was all you needed. It was self-contained.
They kind of backslided.
And they totally backslided. And so...
I don't think...
Except for legendary creatures with the lair actions.
The lair actions are really nice idea.
It may push your entry into 2 pages, but
But
flipping 1 page, not a big deal.
It's all linked. It's not the thing, going to a different book. Lair actions are a really cool addition. So for those of you who aren't aware, lair actions are essentially a set of abilities a monster gets in it. Boss type monster gets in its lair, and they go on a separate initiative usually.
Yeah, usually initiative 20.
Yeah, initiative 20, and these are not tied to the monster status. Right. So even if you stun lock the monster, which is totally possible, especially with the monk, and
that's quite a cough you have there.
The lair actions still go off, so no matter what, the monster is still a threat. You cannot negate the lair actions,
which was the only thing that saved that poor green dragon.
Also,
it didn't. Well, it
For a little while
for a little
longer.
while. Yeah.
I'll admit to not having to interact with this too much yet, but I also think something in the legendary actions interacts with stun.
Yeah.
To where, I mean, they're pretty close to being the same thing. Legendary actions, you have choice of what initiative count they go off on. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say
So that is a definite improvement.
Yeah.
I like that idea, and I definitely want to use it.
And I do like that there are like boss level monsters that do have legendary or layer actions.
Yeah, legendary actions are tied to the monster,
Yeah.
but like they go at a different.
although in the future
But
I think
they have ones that don't have spell casting.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is great because you can run them pretty contained. So just to play devil's advocate, and then I'll let you get your point in,
no, it's
Sean.
fine.
I keep doing that. I guess I don't know.
We're
Feels
very passionate about it.
fair
though.
and balanced.
Yeah,
That's what's happening here.
We're passionate.
Both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
First off, now you would have to pick and choose, and somebody will do the research and totally murder me on this, but there are spells out there, like the basic spells are out there in the free PDFs, so, if you, tablet or take the initiative to print a set yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, granted, there's a little work there, but, you're the DM, you signed up for it. Congratulations. Or, if that's not your thing and you do want to have them all available, they have done the spell cards thing, which the production quality on the spell cards from Gale Force 9 isn't the highest thing ever, but as far as working, they pretty well work.
Yeah.
I mean,
I haven't used them yet, so I want to because
Yeah.
it seems like it would be a lot simpler. But
right. On the flip side, that does require money, and some people don't want to put tons of money into the role-playing habit. I don't understand personally, but no.
well, there's things like food that are necessities, Bill.
Yeah.
Starving academics.
A superintendent salary can cover both food and cars. No, sorry, not a superintendent. Obscure Simpsons reference.
So yeah, I mean that's the thing about fifth ed. I think like fourth ed did have that advantage in prep time, which does because you can make more assumptions about the player character's abilities and what, and then you had the monsters all tidy and ready to go, and it's very easy to reskin monsters.
Yes.
Although it's no harder to reskin
It's
monsters
really
in
easy to
fifth.
reskin them in this. In
Okay.
fact, and just make something completely up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even without the
Yeah, I haven't
I
run
like to
that.
blanch them for 2 minutes in a hot water bath, transfer them to ice, and then it just comes right off.
Oh, and just to mention my legendary actions, to give an example. Sorry, because I want to talk about the adventures
Ross wants
next.
to talk.
Because I've read the Rise of Tiamat, which they actually give Tiamat as a in-boss weird, and she is a multi-headed dragon, and so each head is has a legendary action. So the white dragon head can do this, and the red dragon head can do that, and so that's an example of legendary actions. They're tied to her, but like you can do actions to disable particular heads and stuff like that. So
where on the flip side, layer actions are like, for instance, the aboleth can exert control over water as a layer action
So it can
to try
flood
to
the-
suck you all into the water.
Which was actually really cool.
Yeah.
But now on the monsters, though, for a first-time DM, what I really like about this monster manual, and it may have been the case in earlier editions as well, is there's so much frontis matter on a lot of the monsters that it gives you a good springboard of how they're going to behave if you want to have them interact, things like that. They didn't do that in the starter set, which I think is Aaron's problem with the Green Dragon, so he didn't know what to do with that green dragon. And
This
have
is a
fun
different
with it.
Aaron for the listeners. at home.
this is not the RPPR Aaron. So the actually every monster manual, actually all the way back to second edition.
Although the first monster manual for fourth ed was a little
they've
light on the
improved
ground.
it. They improved it.
Monster,
I think the thing is
monster presentation in general.
fourth and fifth ed have also
progressed a lot as technology.
I think the fourth and fifth ed had sort of rushed productions in terms of the core books.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of some of the problem. Like the starter set, I think was more like they definitely rushed that. Yeah. But they like the second edition was really good about that. Third ed was actually not. But they'd have history, ecology, like history of the monster, ecology of the creature, which is like how it interacts with its local environment.
Which is like the layer stuff.
Yeah, so that's actually been baked into D&D for quite some time. But I think fifth ed, what I really like about the fifth ed monster manual is how it has like the little handwritten notes about like what. And I like that little bit of color. Like that's a really cool.
It's
Sort of
cheeky and it gives you some
touches.
ideas of ways that you could spin it to make it more entertaining for your players.
Yeah. good job ripping off the dungeon or Dresden Files. Some days I can talk. Today's not one of them. But yeah.
Really, I was thinking more Spiderwick Chronicles because that's what it looked like.
Well,
to me.
the Dresden Files RPG is heavily annotated by in-universe characters. It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, no, it's definitely stands out. But why don't we talk a little about these adventures?
Okay.
So there's Horde of the Dragon Queen, which I have not read. You have, though, and you've run it.
I've run the first 4 adventures and read through 5 and 6 out of 8. Yeah. As self-contained units, they're not uniformly horrible. It's hard. Honestly, if you're really interested in reading good criticism of Horde of the Dragon Queen, there's a lot of it out there. But mostly it's a problem of just trying to serve multiple masters. It's pretty obvious that it was put together to try to run the D&D Encounters program on at friendly local gaming stores. So each episode is pretty unconnected to the next. They're pretty obviously set up in alright, you're going to have sort of that metagame buy-in from your players of you basically tell them what they're going to go be doing, and they go and do it. It's maybe not the most railroady thing ever, but it's kind of hard to set a lot of them up. Yeah,
I've read the starter set.
It's pretty railroady.
Yeah, have you read the starter set adventure?
Yes! I know the starter set very well.
More on that to come later in the anecdotes.
Okay.
Burn.
All right. Yeah. No, the starter set is very generic. I actually was going to run D&D using the starter set, but then I read the adventure. I'm like, ugh.
Big old pile of nope.
It was just so like you're traveling with it starts out with you're traveling with a caravan and then goblins attack. It's like that is like archetypally like outside of an old man in a tavern gives you a map and tells you to go on a quest. Like that's right up there with that.
Just like Peter Jackson's Hobbit movies, there are far too many goblins in this and orcs in this edition. So
the amount of goblins in this quest is too damn high.
What you did there, I saw it.
Yeah. So I can definitely see that. One thing is also about, I think they're trying to recreate the original sort of scenarios, module structure of D&D, because back in the day, in the first and second edition, I never participated in these tournaments, but like they would create modules that are now very famous that would be used for tournaments. And like D&D was a competitive thing. Like you would have a group of players go through a 4-hour adventure, and then they would be scored at the end. Did they save the princess? Did they get the treasure? Did they kill the dragon? How many made it out? And then there would be winners and losers.
Yeah.
And so you have like Tomb of Horrors,
White Cliff Mountain.
Yeah.
Other neat stuff.
So I think they're trying to get back to that, to have that sort of and the thing is that created a shared experience. Everyone, how did you deal with the frost giants in this encounter? And so I think they're trying to come back to that, and that's a very admirable goal.
Yeah.
But like it's definitely kind of a rush sort of.
Well, it's hard. I mean, you can.
It's
I think
very
you can read
hard.
the history
And the thing
of
is, I
everyone
think
trying
there
to
would
run
be
Legend of the Five Rings to find out how hard that can be.
I think they're just trying. I think they're being conservative. It's a choice to make it again broadest common denominator.
Well, and I feel like I may have been a little unkind, so I'll recant just a little bit. Yeah. As we have been progressing through the Horde adventure, I think it's getting consistently better.
Yeah.
I'm actually legitimately interested in.
Are you improvising more, or are you just or adapt customizing it?
It's just becoming. It hangs together a little better. There was a lot of kind of but thou must kind of stuff in the beginning, and hard to really. I realize, Sean, it may have been hard to see.
No, it's hard to see, and from a player's perspective, I've actually enjoyed it a lot, but I can see what you mean by they're sort of isolated, and the knots aren't tying together quite the way they should. Especially the thing with the ettercaps was sort of just random.
That actually was random.
Yeah.
It was just, you're traveling with a caravan. Here are things that happen while you travel with the caravan.
Okay, so that was intended. So from a player's perspective, it doesn't seem that bad, but that could just be GM.
It was kind of a couple of sessions of let's do some picaresque stuff instead of adhering necessarily to the plot. Which, especially if you were introducing new people, I can see that being interesting because there is sort of a history of D&D campaigns being a series of things that happen.
Yeah, I guess murder hobos are pretty picaresque if you think about it. So, that's a good way of putting it.
But that's actually the point at which I felt like it started to improve. Before that, there was just a whole lot of Well, this is the same thing I ran into converting Last Breaths. When you've gotten used
That was
to
originally a third ed or a path?
third ed.
Third ed, okay.
When you've gotten used to hanging around with a group that does a lot of investigative gaming,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're like trying to fill in all these gaps in typical fantasy
Now I know what you're
scenarios.
talking about, especially when we were going after the eggs, and you were like, I am so glad you guys got back on track, because that would have been a lot of improv for me.
Yeah. I mean, basically that worked out because I just baited you into it with money. But, like, there's sort of a lot of assumption in the early parts of the adventure that, to pick on RPPR, Aaron, that people are going to do things, for the goods. Because they should, because obviously Dragon Cult evil, so
That
we'll
is a huge problem in the starter set.
Yeah.
Especially when you have idiots that are playing as evil or neutral characters, which never, ever allow that as a GM.
Well, I mean, like, it's definitely more challenging. Like, you
don't run standard scenarios.
Yeah,
with
don't
a
run
group of
standard
evil
scenarios
characters.
with non-standard characters. Yeah, that would be a good thing.
More to come in the end.
If you customize the whole thing to be like evil characters, and
No,
like,
yeah.
At which point,
customized
why
game,
did you
but-
buy the starter box to do that?
yeah.
Yes.
It's very much designed to deliver a very particular, very standardized kind of experience. They've already released the second or the conclusion of this story arc,
quite
The
excited
Rise of
for.
Tiamat, which I already mentioned briefly. And so, spoiler alert, it's about preventing or stopping the rise of Tiamat.
Or not.
We're not.
Oops.
Yeah. And I've read this adventure. Now, I haven't read Horde of the Dragon Queen, but I mean, I didn't feel lost because it's a pretty simple plot.
Yeah.
But the Rise of Tiamat is prevented as a framework. Like, the player's overall goal is to stop this evil cult from summoning Tiamat to be her bad self on Torel, the Forgotten Realms planet.
Spoilers for sure.
I have a question, though, for
Yeah,
both of you. Since
sure.
you're more experienced, is it possible that they did a little bit slightly more railroady in the first book to sort of ease people into the broader framework?
I think really what it comes down to is they
I'm trying to
hired out
be-
design of this, and given that there are some loose ends actually in the rules, I think the poor guys at Kobold Press had to get the first book out the door.
Gotcha.
And probably they had to turn in the adventures in sequential order, which is why I'm seeing them getting better as we
Okay.
get later into the episodes.
I'm just trying to come up with scenarios that might be a little bit more favorable for these poor guys who put a lot of work into it.
Also, they're trying to set it up to be a thing that you can do with whoever shows up at Metagames on Wednesday night.
Or your friendly local game store, yeah.
Well, yeah. I insert here.
Yes. Well, one thing is also, I think, thematically, the Rise of Tiamat is also supposed to highlight the difference between like low-level characters and mid-level characters, because this is designed from levels 8 to 15. So,
We'll be way past that by the time we get to it.
Nope. You're perfectly on track.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
and so by the time you get to level 8, you have access, like you're more competent, more powerful character
You
within
get those
the
level
setting.
3 spells.
You get the level 3 spells, and you're expected to have more. You're no longer the little peons taking orders from Sir What's-His-Face at the
Go
local
kill
castle.
these rats.
You're now equal to Sir What's-His-Face, so you can be like, I'm going to go do whatever, or maybe I'll help you, maybe I won't,
I really like how in the back there's pretty much a breakdown chart of here are all the factions.
Yeah.
Here are the things you can do to piss off or make friends with these factions.
I actually liked that component when that was introduced into the Horde of the Dragon Queen with our recruiting. Did you add that, or was that
No.
actually in the book?
Sorry, which point? I think
Where we were all joining these like secret fraternities on our
Oh.
way out of town before we left.
that's totes in there.
Because I actually enjoyed that.
Okay, I felt like it was a little weak as presented. Like the concept is fun, but
No, the concept is fun, and it was just loose enough to where we could interpret it
It was really
some
loose.
fun ways.
Yeah.
Which, there will be-
more to come.
yeah.
But I think, but it all boils down to this one climactic struggle against the cult, and everything you do in the entire campaign leading up to that point is accounted for,
Yep.
or at least within this adventure. I didn't pay particular attention to links to Horde of the Dragon Queen.
There's a few.
There's a few.
Yeah.
So-
Mostly the big climactic events,
Yeah.
the big climactic story beats of Horde of the Dragon Queen can matter to factions in Rise of Tiamat. So, yeah.
So everything comes to a point, and so that's very good campaign design because you want the players to feel like this
Stuff
meaning
they
there's
do
an
matters.
action. Yeah, the plot actually matters. The progressing, the narrative is continuing. It's not just a series of disconnected episodes. So in that case, that's a success. And in terms of the balance, obviously I have no idea because I haven't,
Me
run
either.
anything. But like Tiamat is pretty hoss.
Yeah.
So
If you've got an hour and a half to kill, Mike Shea from Sly Flourish and I think some guys from the Tome Show
yeah.
actually did a virtual tabletop thing where they do a Tiamat takedown. 5
Okay.
level 20s versus Tiamat.
Well, I mean, the character's only supposed to be like level 15 when they're
Right, but
But-
still, they did 5 level 20s
All right,
versus
fair-
Tiamat.
fair
Because the idea of Rise of Tiamat, actually, I'm pretty sure, isn't that you should end up fighting Tiamat. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure they explicitly call out, if that happens, you're going to have a bad day.
Well, from what I remember, it's the idea is
Well,
you have to
yeah.
you don't have to, but like if you do fight Tiamat,
You can
certain
call in the factions, yeah.
certain actions will have an effect
Yeah.
on Tiamat, and so
Where this was just 5 level 20s versus Tiamat in a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
ass room.
there's a whole section on weakening the Dragon Queen. So the number of actions that you take ahead of
Yeah.
time will
Spoilers.
reduce her. So and they like it's
What was
it's
that
like,
again, Ross?
Well, each action will have like it will do this and this and this. So if
What's
you do
that you say?
yeah.
Things we do might have effects later?
Yeah.
Taking notes.
Weird.
What exactly
Consequences.
do we do to weaken the dragon?
I'll tell
Action
you to
1,
not
2,
tell
3,
him.
and 4, and 5. You do the thing, and then you do the other thing. I don't know how that's not specific enough.
I put the plot coins in the plot dispenser
Yes.
and plot comes out.
So actions have consequences, which is actually
Weird.
yeah. Well, I mean that's I know this is coming in the comments of the first 5th ed game we got, which Distance of Darlan was talking about sort of the murder hoboism of it, and it wasn't too bad. But
I would like to officially apologize to Sean
Oh.
for having my character run down the hallway and force him to flip to the next page in the monster manual to find out what was going to eat me. Because the Grells were not supposed to be right next to the Gricks.
Yeah.
In fact, the Grells were not supposed to be there at all.
chaining those encounters. Now the thing is, and this isn't not specific to 5th ed, is that there is this kind of idea that we go into dungeons, kill monsters, and take their stuff, and for a lot of people that's fine. But obviously, as you mentioned, like in the RPPR group and a lot of other groups, they kind of look for alternate solutions. And to be honest, I don't really see, just from reading the rules and just playing it a few times, I don't see much in the way of difference between how 4th ed and 5th ed handle that. I mean, skill checks, and that's about it.
Sure. Actually, with this Dungeon Master's Guide here in front of me, they have included system if you like to use it for morale rules.
Okay.
As far as breaking a group and all that, there is some more interaction-y stuff in there. I've read it
Yeah.
over. I'm not sure entirely how I feel about it. Might recreate the diplomacy monster problem from 3rd, but it might not.
Yeah, that's one thing is, so Sean, the diplomacy monster thing is 3rd ed had skill checks for like everything, and like they had difficulty numbers for like turning people from like neutral to friendly would be like a DC 15 or blah 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 blah. But you could go from fanatically hating you to fanatically loving you, and that'd be like DC 100 or DC 50 or something.
So-
And
like
you
that.
could pull it off.
And you could pull it off
Either
with a
way,
very
you're
low.
probably going to die. But
No, like you could actually pull with a very low level character with the right, because 3rd had so much material out there, you can make very broken characters. So, and they even included a thing called the Epic Level Handbook, which allowed you to make skill checks at such, if you can make like a DC 100 climbing check, you could climb on a cloud, and like climb up a waterfall or run up a waterfall, and you could make. Or a bluff check, you could make a DC 100 like I am the moon, and then you make sure
He is the moon.
Yeah, make sure your friend is there to give you a +2 assist bonus for he is the moon, and like he is the moon.
I am Wall.
Yeah, I am a wall. I am not the guy you're chasing. Okay, you're. So you could break the game very easily with those kind of characters.
Yeah. But to the specifics there, I think while the framework may look the same, the benefits here, at least in the early days of 5th ed, who knows how things might get, although I'll speak to that point in a moment.
Yeah.
I think for one, given that the difficulty of things falls under the whole bounded accuracy curve, that you're not going to be able to pull off those numerically fantastic successes.
Well, you can't stack as high as you could in third ed.
So you actually can do things with difficulty classes. That and a little bit of the language has changed in how they talk about skills, in that skills should only be used when there's a possibility of success.
Yeah.
Not, oh, he hates me? Roll. Nope, no longer. It's like, I guess maybe it kind of runs in a DM Fiat kind of direction, but...
Which is kind of how fourth ed did it.
Yeah, so. But like, you can say, no, he hates you, and he hates you. There is nothing you can say that's going to keep him from hating you.
Right. But...
At the same time, I feel like the murder hoboism critique is entirely who you're playing with.
Yeah.
Like, there are people that are just complete and total asses that are going to murder hobo everything.
Sean's met several of them.
I have met several of them, and occasionally I will do this myself just to piss Bill off. But
more on that in the anecdotes.
But I do it sort of just for giggles.
Shits and grins.
Occasionally, not all the time.
More than he thinks.
But it really depends on the dynamic you have with the DM and the players and the situation. Dissonance of Darlin, it is sort of supposed to be like a mock Weimar Republic, so there are paramilitary groups. There's going to be some violence, period. But I feel like the players actually did a really good job in not being total murder hobos and trying to do it in more of a procedural fashion, which I thought was very impressive and what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
I was not hoping for the running down the cavern with the grits and the
choices
grills.
were made. Sometimes I do things like that just to piss you off, Sean.
I know, Bill.
I learned it from you, all right? I learned it from watching you.
For once, I'm not the monster.
No, it's just Bill and I have this very interesting dynamic.
It really only pops up at role-playing games.
I don't know. Any game, really.
I'd like to... I don't know. Yeah, it might be.
But I think
it's all in good fun, though.
It's a good point. It depends on the playing group, and I think the thing is, what I was trying to tie this in, consequences. Which is, I think the thing is, if you're having a game where there's murder hoboism rampant, and you don't like it for some reason,
and I completely agree with what you're about to say.
Yeah,
there need to be consequences.
Consequences to your actions. Now, my example would be, and I mentioned this in the comments of the Dissonance of Darlin, which is I've recently been playing a video game called Dishonored, and Dishonored is sort of a stealth action game where you're an assassin. You're trying to take out these targets, but it presents you with a non-lethal option, which is harder to do than just going up and shanking the dude. But you can shoot, but your actions will affect the environment in your end. If you're in a low chaos, and they call this chaos, so if you're in a low chaos environment, there will be fewer guards, they'll be more orderly, but if it's a high chaos, there'll be more soldiers, there'll be more. The society becomes more unstable, and so your actions have a consequence. So that's sort of what you could if you're a DM and you're trying to run a 5th ed game and you're having problems with players just blatantly killing people and just doing really stupid things, like enforce those consequences. I mean
you guys actually successfully avoided some really horrid consequences that I had planned for murder hobos.
I'm sure if we just made our way through the streets of Darlin murdering things left and right, things would have gone a lot worse instead of, luring military heroes into alleyways to club them on the heads.
Militant communist kobolds. So
I really think you need to keep notes on that and use it again later because
I will. Can I sign up?
Yeah,
that sounds awesome.
Interested in your ideas and would like to subscribe to your
I want to be a militant communist kobold. That sounds
Can we run that game?
Yeah.
I actually have that setting done already because I had planned that as just a piece of a possible campaign. So if you really want the militant kobolds, you can have the militant communist kobolds.
Yeah.
But your mom's so classless, she could be a Marxist utopia.
Oh.
Nice. But the...
Derailed.
The issue of consequences is a really important factor to consider, especially if you're running the starter set. Because
But more on that in the anecdote.
Yeah.
I don't know, because right now is actually probably a good time to bring it up. Because I've been helping a friend code DM the starter set.
The aforementioned non-RPPR Aaron.
Which was probably a mistake to begin with, because... reasons. Start
with his mistake, which was playing an RPG with 8 people at his table.
That was the first mistake.
That's something only experienced GM should handle.
And then not.
Well, I mean, I've done that, but rules light game, quick actions. It's very
second mistake, allowing evil and completely morally depraved characters to exist.
Evil characters, morally depraved players.
So this is like
True. Fair point. I'll give you that.
Shades of meaning.
the
Third mistake.
stereotypical I kill everybody to take
Third
this.
mistake. There is a fine line between standing back and letting your players do what they need to have fun and just letting them get away with everything. And it's this issue that falls into the consequences discussion because they just started murdering everyone. And with the starter set, unless you start improvising, there are no real consequences for that.
Always be improvising.
Yeah.
So you really need to come up with interesting solutions to the murder hoboism problem. We had characters that were killing each other. I wanted to come up with an interesting solution so Aaron didn't have to deal with this, even though he was getting giggles out of it and thought it was fun. I found it irritating. So I brought up the issue to Bill. Bill came up with a very fun solution that we can talk about in the anecdotes solution.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But it is a perfect example of a consequence for your actions, especially if you are dealing with rat bastards that kill Barthen in the store. So if you read
NPC?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
They're killing Barthen. They're killing people that are supposed to give them directions. They burn a map to Wave Echo Cavern instead of reading it first. They were just complete and total. Yeah.
The map doesn't actually possess treasure that they can take from it by killing it.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting choice.
They made a lot of weird choices.
All right.
So
I mean, that's kind of players playing it like it was, GTA or a board game.
no, I think they're playing it like they're playing WoW.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
so
pretty
kind
much
of like
it.
GTA.
Yeah, but in WoW, there are consequences for your actions. If you attack someone in a city, the guards will come up and wreck your shit, and you'll be killed very easily
here's the
because they're
thing.
invincible guards.
There were consequences that could have happened, as in total party kills,
Yeah.
that Aaron just granted reprieves. I would not have.
Yeah, definitely not.
I would have just let them get eaten.
He
Yeah.
put on his Monty Hall hat and they all played Let's Make a Deal.
Yeah, that's. I mean that.
It wasn't even a deal. It was just
Well,
sort of a.
it's
I would have been
extended
fine with the
reference.
deal because the
that-
deal you could at least role play and make interesting.
Sorry, Monty Hall was an
this
extended
kind of problem
reference.
has actually been around from D&D since the very beginning, which is just players like hack and slashing everything in sight, and
Including themselves.
including themselves, especially themselves. Did they ever use? Oh, it's what my character would do as an excuse.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I hate Dro.
Yeah.
I hate Dro. I hate Dro.
Welcome to the Brotherhood.
Yeah. So that's just a bad sign of a game. Like that. I mean, that's just a bad sign in general. That's something specific to Fifth Ed, and that's a whole different episode and how to deal.
Well,
with that.
but I
I
feel
think
like
ones you've actually had
yeah,
previously. even.
it's a popular topic. It's
all of them, with the exception of one, are beginning starting players.
Yeah.
And I feel like the starter set could have had a little bit more to help alleviate that problem.
Yeah.
Or at least outline, don't be
The
dicks
DMG,
to
I
each
think,
other.
talks
Be
about
awesome
that,
to one another instead.
Well, okay, but I guess they're assuming that people who, are going to play D&D are probably kind of nerdy to begin with and are probably aware of either John Gabriel's Greater Internet Fuckwad Theory or Will Wheaton. Both of which are great
doesn't the
advice.
starter set
boiled
just have
down
pre-made
to
characters that are all
don't
supposed to be
a
like
dick.
generic hero type characters?
Yes.
Did they make characters from the player's handbook and then use the starter set?
They made characters from the information that had been sent out
Yeah.
for how you generate a character.
Yeah.
So the basic.
The very basics.
Yeah. Okay. That's not specific to Fifth Ed, but yeah, that is problematic, and that's very common. Like I've heard a ton of stories similar. Too many players being chaotic.
Well, and
playing it like it's Hotline Miami.
Aaron is a first-time DM.
yeah.
And so
First-time
he
GM,
wasn't
yeah.
as comfortable improvising, and the starter set didn't really provide him
No,
with
it's
the
definitely
ability.
not enough for that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of options for the players to choose from, but there's not a lot of options for the game runner.
But I mean, on the other hand, the starter set is a very
Right.
limited focus
Yeah.
thing, and it's a bad combination. But there are solutions. Yeah.
I gotta say, that's probably gotta be a really unforgiving thing to try to design, to be the designer that has lived with this game for so long.
Yeah.
And then to ape the martial arts metaphor, to put on your beginner's belt.
Right.
And figure out what a person needs to...
Yeah,
It's
but
one thing to design, but it's also trying to anticipate what trying to be
That's
everything
what
to
I'm
all
saying.
things.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. But
Anyway.
there's no easy solution for it.
Yeah.
But one other thing is just in general, talking about this for DMs about murder hoboism is coming with alternative solutions aside from like if the players get to murder hobo-y, to have realistic or logical consequences, consistent with the setting.
Sometimes logic is not enough.
Well, consistent, like the goal isn't necessarily logic, but internally consistent with the setting.
Yeah.
If you have a setting where there's magical crystals that punish lawbreakers, but then the players kill an innocent person, the magical crystals do nothing. Well, that's not consistent. But what also, like going back to Dishonored, having alternate solutions, like going sort of more like we mentioned earlier with the New World, which is like, I don't want to fight, let's talk to the monsters and reason with them.
Yeah.
And I think some of that was because a lot of my players were very low system mastery,
right,
and they just didn't want to fight because Tom didn't want to learn the rules for fighters.
Whereas, enough talk, let's kill. Except not murder hobo, just...
But if you present those, like having a game of 5th Ed D&D where there's no fighting because the players just decide not to fight, that's fine.
Yeah.
For most groups, some players and GMs would view that as a failed evening because there was...
Well, but at the same time, like, I feel sometimes you can reach an impasse in certain RPGs with the talking. And there are certain systems to where you don't really have any other options once you hit that impasse with words. Whereas Dungeons and Dragons, you hit the impasse with words, you hit it with your hammer.
Right.
It's sort of like you have
negotiations. You definitely have to limit negotiations so you don't have players talking in loops forever. Like what I would do and what I did was like, all right, you make your offer. Let's cut off and roll diplomacy. If you succeed, he goes along with it. If you fail, it's a very binary thing. It's a very simple thing, but it can bypass a fight. Or like, even if you fail, he just says no, but he won't attack you unless you attack him. If you critically fail, then yes, he just is enraged.
He's offended by your offer.
Yes.
Wants to drink your blood. The end.
So that as a GM, I would always try and set up or welcome alternative solutions. So like in the Dissidents of Darlin, if there were more ways to get clues other than going down the stairways and fighting,
there were plenty of other ways.
Yeah.
There were so many ways. I just chose for everyone.
There were 20 different scenarios that I had detailed explicitly, and Bill chose the one that I hadn't.
Okay. Well, which happens.
That
was there for people who wanted to kill things.
It was your first game. I wanted to give you a taste of what it was really like to DM a role-playing game.
No, I actually thought it was fine. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it. And I thought that everybody did a great job.
Yeah.
So...
But I think, there's going to be fighting in most games, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just trying to focus on making the setting consistent, and I think he did that. And some people don't like, and I know for RIPs, there's like the difference between playing a game and listening to it, which is mentioned in the comments and that, which is sort of an unsolvable problem. Which is even in Eclipse phase and stuff like that, that can happen. So,
like to that point, I mean, I probably should have just written a response on the comments on the episode, but whatever, writing, talking, much easier. I think that is going to be a disconnect, any 5th Ed that comes up, so sorry listeners that hate it, but like, the thing about D&D combat is like, you can actually make it for your players at the table much more engaging by kind of doing that whole visuals thing, which makes for some really dull audio because I move here, I swing my sword, but like, you've got, the whole minis and maps thing laid out, having played and GM'd and gotten feedback from other people, that can be really, really engaging.
And for newbies like Melissa and Anne, both repeatedly love the visuals.
Well, and like, this isn't even, I wouldn't even couch this as a criticism, but just more as an observation, like the amount of kind of investigating games or horror games or a combination of the two that the RPPR group ends up doing has attracted a certain set of kind of very verbal, very literarily motivated people where like I think for Anne, for Melissa, for Renee, who I think was in Dissidents but also plays in my game, like I think maybe sometimes a thing we don't end up seeing is the part of the hobby that is sort of the visual kind of, especially maybe even arts and craftsy. Trying not to say explicitly here female, because that'd be generalizing and would be incorrect. Part of the potential player base that like can really dig into that part. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry it makes for bad audio, everybody. Like, genuinely, that's not sarcasm.
Yeah.
But I'm playing. We're playing to our players.
That's what we're always like. Just as an RPPR aesthetic, I always try to run games that are fun, primarily for the people listening or playing the game, and like it just happens that the listeners really like it. So, but that's a minor side, and that's sort of unique to us, and not really applicable to a lot of games.
Yeah, that's not a general.
But
thing. I was just,
Anyways, the other thing, before we go on to Annika, I think we've covered a lot of the broad stuff, and we could talk
a lot of ground covered. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you guys looking forward to in Fifth Ed? Like, in terms of like, what kind of things would you like to see from Wizards next in terms of supplements? Like, do you think anything's missing? Obviously, the DMG has just come out. You guys having a great chance.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it.
Okay.
So.
And I don't own it yet, so...
Yeah. So, and I've read through some of it, but again, I haven't run any adventures yet, so I haven't had much. I mean, I do, just to give you the listeners know, I do plan to run one Fifth Ed game that is literally, you're level 1, you find a deck of many things, and you're stuck in a dungeon, you can't get out yet. So. I'm
fascinated by that idea.
I'm going to make an expanded deck of many things with a lot of it's going to be full 52 cards.
Okay, cool, good.
So,
actually, the Pathfinder one doesn't really have a lot of system aesthetic stuff and has a lot more cards than what's presented here.
There's third-party ones too.
Why?
So I'm
well, that's out there on a wiki somewhere, pretty accessible. So,
but yes, but what do you? I mean, is anything missing? Do you want to, or what kind of new material would you like to see? More adventures, setting material, alternate settings, more classes.
Maybe this is just because
everybody.
Yeah.
Been listening to Bill, and there's nothing more creative than your own mind and the earth and everything and history, that I don't really need the campaign settings. I can come up with stuff on my own.
Yeah.
That's
so
the advantage of being a PhD candidate in history.
Yeah.
It works for Kenneth Hyde. Kenneth Hyde just takes from history, and it bleeds weird.
But there's plenty of some of the supplemental material that you need for campaign settings and creative generation is not necessarily going to come from the publisher of Dungeons and Dragons. So be willing to look outside the box.
Okay.
But as far as what I would like to see more of is, frankly, a few more monsters with different lair actions, because the lair actions, there's only a few monsters that really do that, and I feel like that's some of the best work that they've done in the monster manual, and I would like to see more of that.
Maybe just like 20 monster layers with their unique monsters in them.
Mm-hmm.
So
when they create new monsters and have the monster manual too or whatever, more of those lair action legendary creatures would be nice.
Which I think you would probably see coming, because I've seen some, tabulation and analysis. When you dig through the monster manual, it's heavily weighted to the low end of the experience, challenge rating, character stuff spectrum. So there's definitely more kind of design space left above level 5 than below, say, to draw a random line in the sand. So I would expect, with higher level monsters, to see more of that kind of stuff.
At the same time, though, I'm not going to be upset if they don't do it, because frankly, I can reskin something basic and give it a lair action.
Yeah.
So, and do that.
Yeah.
But it would require more time and more work.
Yeah, things to save you prep time are always nice.
Strangely enough, what I'm actually looking forward to is kind of the restraint I'm seeing coming from the rate of publication of material in this edition. They're not already announcing a bunch of new stuff in the pipe, and that kind of excites me, because my gosh, both 3rd and 4th edition were Book of the Month clubs. And it got tiring and definitely expensive after a while. I mean, for someone with kind of a completionist bent like me, you end up going and buying all this stuff because it's so pretty and so neat, but you never get to use most of it.
That's fair.
So the fact that, there's actually, Tyranny of Dragons, the whole Horde and Rise combo is done now. It's been published and it's done. And, they're not really going to push a lot more adventures out the door until next year, when they're going to do something Elemental Evil related.
Yeah.
And there'll be, a couple of adventure books and a player option book for that. I'm actually really loving that pace. It's going to give us a chance to sort of explore what's out there right now. The Dungeon Master's Guide is full of a lot of really great options as far as optional things you can plug into your game.
Yeah.
To make D&D do all those kind of weird different things it can do. They have said that in the first of the year, there's a strong chance that there'll be kind of a Unearthed Arcana like column going on their website to explore more of the rules modules for like mass battles and stuff that they just couldn't. Constraints of this book is already 320 pages.
Yeah.
And Anne actually wants that because Anne wants like a huge battle
mass
at some
battles.
point.
That was one of the things I was going to bring up is actually give us some Rain type rules. Rain being a one roll engine game with fantasy rules for
My brother
organizations.
plays it.
Okay,
I know it. So,
well, also for listeners at home, I'm sure probably you're mostly familiar with it, but rules for mass combat would be nice. For layer action, working on that, I would love to see some sort of unusual kind of layer actions on monsters, like a Godzilla or Shadow of the Colossus style fight where you're fighting through multiple actions of a ginormous monster. So you just treat each hand as a different monster and that kind of thing. So the players fight through an entire multi-stage. Also, environmental stuff. I would like to see something
giant
about
hand.
Well, like a giant. Well, like
Giant.
No,
like
I'm
left
just
hand.
thinking about mine.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so you can have for the Smash Brothers themed game.
I thought
It was-
talking about Wall Masters.
No, it was a spell that was cast. That
Was it Bigby's Master Hand?
Yeah, it was an illusion, I think.
Anyway.
So
it was similar to what you did with the Aboleth, but
Yeah.
reskinned.
So I would like to see. I would also like to see more stuff on making fights more varied through environmental hazards or setting, like stuff on traps, hazards, or things that like change, like shifting battlefields, battlegrounds, like kind of the kind of material you'd see. I saw in Iron Heroes.
Yeah.
Is there stuff on
I think
traps
you'll
and
find there's some stuff on traps in here.
Yeah.
There are sort of the run of the mill environmental
But like
stuff.
some
There's
really,
various
but again, to
kinds of
save prep
molds.
times,
Yeah.
something really unusual, and better social conflict rules, like for factions and political intrigue would be, especially if they're doing Temple of Elemental Evil, because the
I don't know if it's going to be Temple, but it's
Elemental
just
Evil was pretty famous for that. So
right. But I don't know as it's per se going to be the Temple so much as it's just themed around. But still, that would lead to those cult factions.
But yeah.
Apropos of nothing.
Also, I would like to see something kind of like the OGL too. Maybe not exactly like the OGL, but something that makes third-party publishing easier.
Yeah,
because
it's supposed to be coming in the new year.
Yeah.
Along Ross's lines with that, maybe instead of generating more monsters with lair actions, give like a few pages in like a Dungeon Master's Guide 2, if it's not in here already, how to generate your own lair actions or a list of possible lair actions that you can randomize, something like that, so that you don't have to just do all this work and you can just, I want to use this monster as the boss.
Yeah.
I'll just do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Something I am really excited about in the Dungeon Master's Guide that I've read through in the past couple of days is they've significantly expanded the material on downtime activities.
Oh yeah.
In some pretty exciting ways. Things that tend to come up in D&D games. There are, explicit rules frameworks for, let's say your PCs want to run a business or build a castle, or like if you're running that kind of intrigue game, here's what it costs in time and money to spread rumors in communities of what size.
One thing that people do in RPGs, RPG fans do, like they never run games, but you always get that one supplement or something where you like build characters or you do something that's just for fun. And like I know with Third Ed, one of my favorite handbook supplements of all time was the Stronghold Builder's Guide.
Yeah.
And I made like a bunch of strongholds that I never, like maybe one turned up in a game, but I love like figuring out what the best. So I love some sort of nerdy kind of thing where like, let's build a castle filled with traps or, monsters or whatever. Because it was just a cool thing to do, like for PC Stronghold. So that's just, I mean, you can adapt that obviously, but like, I don't know, that would be fun. But anyways, so I think that's a good little summary so far of what we've thought about
A
today.
good hour and a half of chatting.
So when we come back, we will have shout-outs. We have a bunch of those. And then, of course, anecdotes about mini 5th Ed player experience. So we'll be right back. back. I haven't chosen music yet, but I'm sure it was great. Anyways, shout outs. First off, I would like to mention the Better Angels GM screen is out, and I helped create it by pick what material was actually on the screen. So
By his not a book.
well, it's not mine, but
By partially his not a book.
yes, it's the
getting
GM
really
screen, not a
weird.
book.
Yeah. I said not a book.
Yeah, it fell apart. But yeah, anyways. So if you're running Better Angels, that's definitely something to get.
And why aren't you?
Yes, because it's awesome. You have. Well, we'll just take turns.
I've got a huge list because things are fun. Okay, Ross told me that he's previously shouted out to one of these movies, but I'm going to mention them both. They're Chinese wushu detective movies-ish. At any rate, they are Detective D and I believe the Phantom Flame.
I'm
Detective
sure
D and the Phantom Flame, and Young Detective D and the Sea Dragon.
I'm not mentioning
are pretty great. Like I said, Chinese detective movies with wushu elements set in like the 8th century.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're fantastic. I mean, the subtitles on the version that's on Netflix, they are free streaming on Netflix, are occasionally sketchy, but they're just, they're great. I don't know what to say other than they're great.
All right. Sean, there's a show you were watching.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of QI, which is short for Quite Interesting, which is a BBC trivia type show hosted by Stephen Fry. It's been going on for several seasons.
I've seen clips of it. It looks like
it's really hard to get over here in the States, although they do have 4 seasons available on Hulu now, I believe, which is great. The best ones for me are the ones with David Mitchell because he has this wonderful angry logic.
Mitchell and
Webb.
Of Mitchell and Webb.
That's
David
Mitchell.
What?
No, I think that. Have you watched
Mitchell and Webb?
Yeah.
We'll show you later.
No, I've watched Mitchell and Webb.
That's Number Wang?
What?
That's
Number
Number
Wang?
Wang? Have you seen that sketch?
The game show?
I've watched that.
Yeah.
But so their series, which they're always based on letters in the alphabet, they just started L beginning the end of November. So they're a couple episodes in. Mitchell should be showing up on his stint on the show in December 19th. He's always in a couple of episodes because he runs a radio broadcast in Britain that's very similar to QI. So they have this very nice rivalry because they do interesting facts, but with a bunch of comedians around a table, sort of in a game show setting. And
I think I might have heard of this. Is this where Mornington Crescent came from?
I think so.
Okay.
But I really enjoy it. I got hooked on it when I was doing research in Europe.
Yeah.
So now I need to get my fix. So
nice. Speaking of Europe, I actually saw a movie. I didn't mention this earlier, but I saw it last night called As Above, So Below.
That's great.
Is that the Frenchie?
It is a found footage
Yeah.
set in the Parisian catacombs. It was actually filmed in the catacombs. They actually got permission for the first time.
On location.
Yes, on location. And it's about the main character. I kind of love because she's a total PC. She's basically Laura Croft, and she's an expert in archaeology and martial arts. And
so she's a Tom character.
Yeah, she's more like Jason because she's just like, fuck it, let's do it. Like, let's grab this artifact in the museum and look around it and set it on fire to find a clue.
So critically, and I don't know. I guess this is
Leroy Jenkins the entire fucking movie. It's awesome. Pretty awesome. It's pretty great.
Spoilers for the latest Ken and Robin, but do they run into a ghoul who turns out to be Nicholas Flamel?
Yes, they do. Or he's mentioned Flamel. I don't know if they.
Awesome.
They don't. There are ghoulish things in there. I don't think
there are ghouls in the catacombs.
There are ghouls in the catacombs. So
I can believe it.
It's a highly entertaining movie. There are some jump scares, and there are a couple of like what, but I don't know. And there's a whole alchemist sort of thing to it. Looking for philosopher's stone. So, anyways, it's very entertaining. Very much. The PC logic for life. I dug it. So you
I've got a bunch more.
Yeah.
Next one on my list, Binding of Isaac Rebirth is a remake of the cheap indie Binding of Isaac game from Edmund Macmillan.
Yeah.
Also famous for Meat Boy. It's been cleaned up and ported out of Flash.
They have controller support now, don't they?
Yes, native controller support, which is really great.
That's the only reason why I didn't really play the first one that much.
Yeah, native controller support now. It's cheap as cheap. There's a couple new chapters. I guess just one new chapter added.
Yeah.
Two new bosses, the Lamb and Mega Satan.
Ooh.
Yes.
Mega or Mecha?
Mega.
Okay.
Mega Satan.
It's 1 million Satans put together.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. And that's horrible. No,
Yeah.
wait, that's 40 cakes. Anyway, I honestly, I will say, I don't know whether it's just removing the weirdness of Flash or whatever. I feel like at the end of the day, they've ended up making the game easier, which definitely was the direction they had available to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm finding it easier, but maybe that's just,
More skilled.
yeah, maybe I'm just getting better at twitchy video games.
And speaking of video games, there was another Steam sale recently, so I've loaded up on games. I've already mentioned Death Skid Marks in the last episode, but I got another one, another roguelike called Dungeon of the Endless, which is like you are people on this prison ship, spaceship, and it gets damaged. You have to escape in an escape pod, and you crash onto this planet, but you crash really far down into a secret lab facility left by a previous species. So you're like 12 levels deep, and you have to get your way back up to the top.
When will we be playing this in Base Raiders?
I don't know.
That sounds like a Doctor Who episode.
Yeah, it is very sci-fi. It's space fantasy because there's also like alien. So like the thing is, it combines roguelike with tower defense because you have this object that you need to protect, the crystal, which you have to get to the surface.
Crystal.
And the monsters are all heading towards the crystal, and so you have to open up rooms to find the exit to each level, and then you have to take the crystal to the exit. But whoever's carrying the crystal is slowed down. So you have these heroes to protect the crystal and explore, and you can build little turrets to set it up. So it's actually got kind of a complex, unique gameplay, but it's got strategy, it's got real-time elements to it. It's very unique title, very unique gameplay, and I really dig it. It's got great music, very fun. This is Sean's first time, so I think he's out of...
Well, actually, can we do shout-outs for charities and things like that?
Oh, sure.
Look at Sean being all humanitarian.
What?
No, it's fine.
Humane, not humanitarian. You'll get that
fair
when I
point,
say
fair
it. But
Yeah.
if anybody's looking to donate to a animal shelter this winter, the Haven of the Ozarks, which is in Wabash, Missouri, is an excellent shelter. That's where we got our dog from, and
That's the jingling you might hear in the background.
yeah,
from the dog collar. So.
He's extremely well trained. They did all that work.
Wow.
It's really low fees when you adopt him, $75, and that came with all the immunizations and the spaying and neutering and a whole bunch of stuff that they give you as like a starter kit.
Cool.
So they really care about the animals. They really need a lot of help because they put so much investment into them. They give them a lot of range to run in.
Oh.
So because they're out in the country, but they're a great organization. So Haven of the Ozarks, if you're thinking.
Cool.
All right, no,
And they're at PetSmart in
I think it's a
Springfield
first. We're
every
just been
fourth
so-
Sunday.
yeah.
So you can just walk up and they take like.
If you're in the area.
Well, yeah. If you're going to PetSmart,
If you're in
anyway,
Europe, probably don't book a
Yeah.
flight.
they take donations in kind. So if you're buying like food or pet treats for your dog at PetSmart or whatever, you can just like double order and then hand it to them on your way out the door
Awesome.
on every fourth Sunday.
That's
Nice.
really awesome.
Cool.
Back to me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll roll these together just to try to cut this down a little bit. I got fulfillment on a couple of Kickstarters here lately. They're both mapping products for, weird fantasy RPG stuff. The first one probably more people have heard of is Dwarven Forge. Their Cavern set is being fulfilled right now, and so should be regularly available for purchase here soon. Even in the gray, like the unpainted gray, the stuff is gorgeous. The sculpts are really awesome. Melissa and I are going to have to try to con people into helping us paint them at some point. Because
I don't think you're going to have to con Ann that hard.
there's just so much to do. I
All the
haven't even
crafting.
finished my dungeon tile, my straight dungeon set yet.
Yeah, Start Dungeons, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome, yeah.
Oh, the caverns are, I will say, probably even better.
Are these like the ones that you had before with the three-dimensional stuff?
Yeah, except
Okay.
instead of just being flagstone dungeons, they're actual natural form cavern stuff. Yeah,
nice.
it's going to be great.
We could do that Catacomb game.
That's true. Totes could. Along with that, another mapping product, because I am a shameless whore for mapping products, is called Blue Dungeon Tiles from a little company called Red Kobold Games. If you remember those like second edition and I think even more so earlier, the maps that came in the back of D&D modules, they're always printed on that blue grid paper. Somebody has come up with, I forget the guy's name, but really awesome mapping stuff that's kind of cast in that blue color. They're kind of
old school.
Yeah, they're thin, kind of like a really heavy, I don't know, they're probably a little bit heavier than a cardstock, but they're also laminated on both sides. There's a bunch of geoforms available. They're just really good stuff. They'll be attachable with like blue painter's tape. Thanks, Charlie, for moving the chair.
It just kind of collapsed.
It happens.
He went limp.
Yeah.
I think they're really great. Ross, have you ended up using those yet? Ross,
No, I was going to use them in that gate crashing game, but then I got distracted and I forgot to map it out.
Boo!
I know. Well, now I have the Catacombs game. Now I have all these other ideas for that.
That's true.
So,
sometimes.
And actually, there's another good way I could use it from the new supplement I got for the laundry. God Game Black, because this is the updating the laundry series for the RPG for the fourth novel, the Apocalypse Codex. Adds a bunch of new stuff, including the Black Chamber, and more importantly, which is the U.S. Occult Intelligence Agency, they're very fucking scary and evil. If you sign up with them, they literally get your soul when you die. And they file it away. They might resurrect you if you're useful, or they might file you away for a term.
So, the SS. No.
Yeah, well, again, this is more like the NSA or something like that with occult Cthulhu mythos technology.
So for all of you Delta Green players who thought Majestic was a bag full of dicks.
Yeah, no, this is they're pretty terrible. But they also have a chapter on the Plateau of the Sleeper, which is where the big bad of the setting is sleeping, and there are ruins in it.
Totes not Nyarlathotep.
Yeah, so you could totally have an adventure where the players are sent to the plateau to go investigate some ruins that showed up or something like that. So there could be dungeon crawling in that. It's a really cool book. It's got a lot of neat stuff. They have a whole chapter on external assets, which are the laundry's mercenaries that they hire out. So if you want to do a more standard Cthulhu cowboy kind of game, you could make characters that have the laundry kind of computational demonology, but aren't bound by the bureaucracy. So more of of the laundry.
You don't know.
Yeah, you haven't read the laundry, but it's literally bureaucrats with Cthulhu mythos.
No, I can see bureaucrats being demons. That makes perfect sense.
British bureaucrats.
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
Are they also university administrators?
Hey,
maybe not that evil. They're supposed to be the good guys. Highly recommend it. And I think finally you just had the Gale Force spell cards. You guys.
Yeah, I've got that. Which we talked about those in the main thing. So yeah,
I'll put a link into it.
Okay.
There's one 5th Ed thing. You guys talk about 5th Ed. There's actually a character generator that I found. It's in Java. It's just powered on one web page. That's how I made my characters for these one shots. Because it's click here. What class? What level? What are your stat increases? What build are you choosing?
Nice.
And it prints it all out.
All right.
So I'll put a link to that. And yeah.
For any of you who haven't heard the internet getting real wild about it yet, there's a podcast out there called Serial. It's kind of a spin-off from This American Life. We're not sure, but what Caleb may have already talked about this.
Yeah.
But essentially it's a deep dive kind of true crime reporting on one crime for an entire season's worth of episodes. I won't go into it too deep, but if you haven't checked it out yet, you really should.
Yeah.
I know it's probably a little gauche to say that there are gameable elements in a true crime thing.
Yeah.
But
we previously just had a whole episode on it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, those are things.
It's very good. And you had 2 more, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll just dispose of those really quickly. Okay. First off, a board game I picked up back at GameCon back in October. Finally started playing a little bit. Tales of the Arabian Nights is really great. Once again, in kind of a picaresque kind of thing. It's a bit more storytelling than most of the Euro games I'm used to playing, but it's a lot of fun. Basically, you're a character from the Arabian Nights, and you start out in Baghdad, and the goal of the game is to kind of stumble around the mythical Middle East, having things happen to you until you hit a critical mass of story and destiny points, and then you go back to Baghdad and become the Sultan, more or less. It's pretty great. And then my final kind of weird shout out, it's just been Thanksgiving, so I'd like to give a shout out to a cooking technique we've talked, Ethan and I have talked a little bit about on the forums, spatchcocking. If you ever find yourself in need of cooking specifically a whole turkey for Thanksgiving, look up spatchcocking, because I managed to cook a 14-pound turkey in an hour and a half.
You might want to spell that for them, because I can see that going horribly wrong on a search engine.
Spatchcocking?
It's pretty direct,
actually, it's all one word.
Yeah.
Don't separate it. But yeah, it's kind of like butterflying, but a little more advanced. But if you want to avoid the sort of normal turkey problems of dry breast meat or your dark meat's not done, do this. You're going to cut out the backbone and essentially give your turkey CPR, and it'll all get done really fast and all together. It's pretty great.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
I will not try that, but I'm sure I will appreciate it.
It's actually in Julia Child's cookbook as well for duck, but you can use it on any bird.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you happen to have that,
Yeah.
I'm clearly
Bored in the kitchen.
so.
Yeah.
So finally, we have anecdotes. I mean, we've been playing a lot of like Eclipses lately, and there have been some shenanigans vis-a-vis Jason showing up for one shot, and also the Jovian Republic. But we can save that for another episode. This is about 5th Ed D&D, and you guys have been running a ton of 5th Ed.
So where do you want to start?
Yeah.
Should I start with my video game one with the...
Let's see. I know I've got.
Why don't we start with the one that was actually mentioned in the episode, which was dealing with the problem players?
Okay,
Yeah.
so remember those problem players from other Aaron's game, which I should mention, I was essentially just a sergeant at arms in this game, sitting back,
trying to absolve yourself of responsibility.
No.
aren't you?
I was
order.
trying to make sure everybody understood how the system worked, and failing horribly because they didn't really want to listen. But that's aside from the point. So
You're in academia. You should have known that you were going to be telling people.
they didn't let me
want to
write a
hear.
syllabus.
Yeah.
So
A syllabus for RPG. That is a great idea. So I like it.
I will
Coming
do it
soon
next
from
time.
Ross Payton.
Or Sean Whippy, whichever one of us does it first.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway.
So I was trying to come up with ways for Aaron to not have it be so murder hobo-y, because me sitting there and having to deal with this while Aaron was just letting it run rampant was driving me nuts.
Yeah.
So I related my problem to Bill, especially the problem of them killing each other. And so Bill came up with this solution.
All right. So, in complete fairness to Caleb, I totally ripped this off from him. I was listening to No Evil at the time. So Sean related to me that his group of
Level
unsane,
3, I think.
level 3 unsane murder hobos.
The
had
chimps that I've been observing from
Yeah.
the wild.
had decided that they were going to take on was it a young adult or full on adult green dragon?
It was a young green dragon, but still stupid.
They
They were level 2s at this point.
Yeah, 2s or 3s. The dragon is like a level 8. It's a bad deal. So, having read monster entries in D&D before and stuff like that, knowing kind of what a green dragon did, and like I say, ripping off Caleb, I wrote back to Sean that, based on what is said about a green dragon, a green dragon, each chromatic dragon has kind of its favored type of treasure. Green dragons, in addition to, gold and gems and valuable stuff, like to have agents. They like to have people. Well,
They're like Pokemon trainers.
yeah.
Only we're the Pokemon.
So I figured based on that a dragon that knew it could completely wipe the floor with these adventurers wouldn't put things to chance, just in case, the adventurers might accidentally off it by, some weird adventurer-y kind of way.
5 crits in a row,
Yeah. So obviously it would have some sort of agenda. And here's the agenda that it would have. In 5e, the way I've read the rules, which this is just what I've read, I may have been wrong, but whatever, I like it, so it's going to be my house rule. Basically, you can choose to do non-lethal damage when you knock a character out, or knock a monster character, whatever, when they would normally go into negatives and start dying. All you have to do is choose. So I said, all right, to Sean, I wrote back to him in an email, here's what I feel like the Green Dragon should do. He fights all the characters just to knock them out, and then wakes them up, clapped in irons, at the back of his cave, where he draws attention to the new necklaces they're all wearing, which are all magic items that have the explosive runes spell etched on them, with several contingencies on which the explosive rune spell now located around their necks will detonate. Namely, of course, the command word if the dragon just says, all right, it's time for you to die now. Or if they attack the dragon any further. Or if they attack agents of the dragon, which now include all their fellow party members. Were there any other specifics? I think that
was pretty much
it. Yeah.
But it actually wound up being a little bit better, and this was the only time that I actually really enjoyed this was because they were complete and total saps. So they were totally obsessed with gold. These players were wanting to know if they could trade XP for gold. That kind of a player. Kind of a thing. Yeah, it's stupid. But anyway, so they get to the dragon, and instead, the dragon congratulates them on getting there and offers them treasure, which they willingly take.
Your reward.
They take the shiny necklaces. They have choices, actually. There were multiple things of treasure.
Multiple choice points.
So the necklaces are gold, and all of the coins are copper. They go for the golden necklaces and put them around their necks. I specifically asked them. This was Aaron let me do this, but he didn't want me to do it to where they were forced to do it.
Yeah.
With the knockout and putting them on their necks because he is a little bit too benevolent and
I don't know. I feel like they had choice there. They had choice to fight an 8th level.
That's fine. I still wound up getting them because I'm an asshole, even though Aaron's not. So.
You must go with the name.
Yeah. So they put them on willingly and are showing off their bling bling, and then the dragon goes, "Oh, by the way, I should mention if you look on the back of those, there's a set of instructions and there's magic glyphs on the front. This is what you can and can't do." And so they've been dealing with that for a while, and they did manage to calm down and get to Wave Echo Cavern before they started acting stupid again, at which point, apparently, I pieced out. I was done because my blood pressure doesn't need that. Yeah. But Aaron apparently also finally got frustrated and activated the glyph. So
They made 2 characters?
No.
Okay.
It's Wave Echo. That's the end.
Oh, okay.
But they weren't getting anywhere because they just kept debating about leaving the cavern or going back to a room they've already been into to look for more treasure and stupid crap like that, or feeding someone to the ghouls that are in there.
And apparently, the other DM person is unwilling to use Raymond Chandler's law. And
when in doubt, send in 2 goons with guns.
Yeah.
Or
Dashiell Hammett's just... Same thing. But if it was me, I probably would have just sicked the Tarrasque on them at some point. But
that's what it's there for.
But the glyphs, heads exploded, game over. It's done.
Yep.
May it rest in pieces. So, and then,
that's one way of dealing with problem players.
Since that was sort of my anecdote, do you want to go over the horse murder?
Horse murder. Okay. So have been running Horde of the Dragon Queen, and the 4th episode is, as we said before, kind of picaresque. You're trailing the cult of the dragon as they move a hoard of treasure in wagons from Baldur's Gate up to Waterdeep. And essentially there's a D12 table of random things that can happen. So I had rolled out it's one of those wonderfully, Gygaxian D&D things where, first, you roll a d20 for each day to find out if something special happens. Then if something special happens, here's a random table of things that can happen. One of the things they ended up with was a member of the caravan who was sort of a upper middle class or maybe even noble bent.
I thought he was a lawyer.
Yeah, so, like I said... is being a real dick to his horse. Doesn't like his horse, beats it, berates it, asks other characters to sell them his horse, etc. So some of the characters who were not Sean, specifically Melissa, my wife, decided that they needed to do something about this, because this isn't really framed as something you have to do anything about. This is just a thing that's happening.
Noted that Melissa and I are both huge animal lovers, so this was sort of...
People are stupid.
It was baiting us, even though it was unintentional.
Yeah. So. Well, no, this is... It's
I know some of the monsters are great.
No, it's choices. Yeah. It's choices.
Continue.
So
I
Melissa
did the
one
same thing in the
morning.
Jovian game.
Yeah.
I guess I'll mention that. But
Okay. Melissa one morning had her character dose the lawyer's food with poison. And unfortunately, he made his constitution save. So I said, all right, so he's put off a little by it. He doesn't notice you doing it, but he has the shits all day. So weird, having intestinal discomfort doesn't make you any nicer to your horse. In fact, riding a horse all day with intestinal discomfort probably makes you crabbier. So he starts beating his horse, and it looks like he's going to kill it. And then Sean, playing his Warforged monk, decided that he was the law, and decided to be judge, jury, and executioner, runs up, punches the lawyer in the head.
No, it was an axe.
I'm sorry.
I cleaved his head in twain. And normally I don't, like I said, I normally don't do the murder hobo thing, but this was...
But yeah,
you have to draw a line.
the horse was going to die.
no words were spoken.
Yeah.
He was not asked to stand down. It was just from the other side of the caravan, the robot runs up and axes him in the head. As I recall, you criticaled.
Yes, it critted.
So instead of like just axing him, you actually, you decapitated him. And then once again, because I was listening to No Evil, I decided the whole thing on the Scum Swarm was a pretty good framework for things. Yeah. Yes. So the Caravan Master staged an impromptu murder trial for the robot, where the other, lesser wagon masters of the wagon train would serve as essentially the jury voting for what to do with Sean's character. And thanks to some quick political engineering and diplomacy checks on the rest of the party's part.
Mostly Melissa acting as my advocate.
Running around being really charming to people because sorcerers have high charisma.
Yeah.
Managed to, get him acquitted. For now.
I wasn't even...
Yeah. Yeah, instead of just forcing you to leave the wagon train or clapping you in irons and delivering you to the magistrate of the next town.
Well, it should be noted that you did try to clap me in irons, and I tried to be all stealthy with smoke bombs, and it failed repeatedly.
Yeah.
So...
Weird. But yeah. But we have yet to fully explore the consequences of
and I am actually looking
lawyer.
forward to what the consequences will be.
Yeah.
Spoilers, it's probably going to involve assassins.
Yeah, that would make sense. But sympathy monsters are a time-honored tool of the DM.
Yeah.
And I recently used one also in an Eclipse Space game. Aaron, the RPPR's Aaron.
This is going to be Scrum Troll.
Yeah, so they're in the Jovian Republic. They're undercover. And a factory blows up for reasons and in the city. And this causes a lot of unrest, so the police send out search teams all throughout. They just do a crackdown. And in the midst of this crackdown, they find an innocent AGI that had been living in the fringes of Jovian society, just undercover for years. So I was influenced because I just seen the trailer for Chappie, and I'm just saying this is just some poor AGI that uploaded itself, just basically a toaster that got too smart and built itself a robot body, and was just the police are like, this guy was clear. They're using him as a scapegoat. They're gonna,
So what? Did you think it would be too on the nose to make it a Cyrock copy?
No, it was too on the nose. There's no way it could have gotten into the Jovian. It was just like, a toaster that got too smart. And of course, Aaron's like, well, we have to rescue him. Well, he might have valuable knowledge about how to survive in the Jovian society undercover. Like, yeah, but it has nothing to do with your mission. And so Caleb was against it. But they wound up, they didn't go to the police station themselves to rescue it. They hired a sociopathic assassin to do it for them.
Bartleby?
No, another one.
I think that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, no. But this guy had already had a way into the police station because he figured he would need to, because he was basically a freelance assassin for the local criminal syndicates. And he said, pay me 50,000 credits and I'll do it, or pay me or help me get my money off the Jovian Republic and I'll do it for you. And so they do. They say, okay, we'll help you. And so they don't do anything themselves, but when he goes in there, they say, he kills like a dozen cops, and they're all flats with no backups. And so he kills a dozen innocent cops in order to get this one robot and the one human sympathizer out of it. So good job. But Aaron's like, it was worth it, because that's where his priorities are. So, but and it will come into the next session, but that hasn't happened yet. Basically, so that's something to look forward. But and speaking of sociopathic actions, I think we should end on the game that you were at, the second one,
the
which hasn't
Nintendo one.
Yeah.
I won't give too much away about the plot, but it's a Nintendo themed game to where you're sucked into the universe, sort of.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Captain N style.
The plane of Nintendo.
Yeah.
But anyway, at some point,
Nintendo.
our heroes, which included Tom, Aaron, Ross, and Anne, and David, fought Bowser and a couple of skeleton Koopas, and they quickly dispatched them, much to my surprise, which is why the encounter calculator probably needs some work.
Yeah.
But after they had killed him, to my abject horror, Tom and Anne both ask, can we wear his shell as armor? And so they had been given bennies, sort of like what Bill does with bennies.
Which were kind of like moxie points in a flip phase.
And they spent all of their bennies re-rolling on strength checks to pry the shell off of Bowser to wear it. And then, when one of them got it, they're like, well... there's the chest plate shell. We could rip that off too. So both of us could have armor, and like up there, like I was like, okay, I'll let you have like a +1 armor class or something from this if you really want to do it. And so they basically shell Bowser completely and then go marching into the next room wearing pieces of Bowser, leaving his...
It's the name of my high school ska band.
And I think at
my
some point...
high school chiptune band.
David had mentioned making turtle soup out of him, too. So they really hated on Bowser quite a bit.
Quite murder. Yeah, you don't waste not, want not. I mean, you know...
we use every part of the NPC.
Well, didn't he also, like, barbecue Ganon after a certain point, too?
Yeah.
But,
well, yeah.
Whatever. But anyway, that's...
Squeal, piggy.
If I give away any more, I'll give away the whole plot. So, and there will hopefully be a sequel. I've got the sequel drafted. It's just a matter of playing it, which, Bill, you are welcome to play because it doesn't matter if you played in the previous one.
Yeah.
So you just need to build a level of character. But anyway.
With that lovely mental image in your head.
Yes, a flayed, shelled Bowser.
I think I've read fan fiction like that.
It's horrid.
So, yes, this has been RPPR episode 109, the 5th Ed D&D Breakdown. We'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.